On July 9th, 1993, just after 1:40 a.m., Russell Peterson of Sedona, Arizona, called 911 and reported that there had been a very bad accident during an argument with his wife, Stephanie. When he was asked to elaborate, Russell said that his wife had been shot and she was hurt very badly, though he couldn't give a straight answer when it came to exactly who shot her. But he did suggest that she may have shot herself. Suspicions arose later when the couple's 4-year-old daughter told investigators that it was her dad who had fired the fatal shot. Hey guys, and welcome to the Moms and Mysteries podcast, a true crime podcast featuring myself, Mandy, and my dear friend, Melissa. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Mandy. How are you?
I am doing well. Spring has sprung, and
Spring
we're
is
feeling great.
springing.
Yes, the bumblebees are flying and buzzing, and the flowers are blooming, and the pollen is everywhere.
Oh, yeah. The pollen. So much pollen. I saw mosquitoes yesterday, so I'm already like, okay, I remember now. I remember.
You have zero tolerance. You're like, as soon as the humidity gets a little too high and you see one mosquito, you're like, nope, never mind, forget it. I don't want summer.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, I've been team winter quite a bit this year, and it's mostly because of the mosquitoes, but we're going to conquer and make it through, and it will be a great year, I think. I don't know. Let's be positive. You're always positive. I'm trying it.
It is a great year. We're in March.
Wow, okay.
You can't just say it's going to be a great year. It has to be a great year right now. It's a great
You
year
have to,
already.
Feel it in your stomach? Okay. It's going to be a great year. Speaking of great things, we actually did our first mailbag episode last week, and you and I were both kind of nervous about how it would go, and we didn't get too many stories, so we were a little anxious, what if people were even interested in doing it. It went so well, Mandy.
It was so fun.
Yeah, it was so much fun. We got so much great feedback, and we've gotten so many stories.
I cannot wait to do it again. Yeah, it was so fun. I made my husband listen to it. I was like, tell me what you think about this. Did this work, and did it sound good or whatever? Yeah. And he agreed. He said it sounded great. So, which of course he could just be lying and being nice to me. I have no idea. I hope that he would not lie to me.
I want my husband to lie to me about just about everything. I'm like, don't tell me what I need to hear. Tell me what I want to hear.
Tell me if I'm just embarrassing myself, please.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Don't lie to me.
Don't let your kid listen. That's the thing. If you let them, then it's over. So it was a lot of fun. So thank you guys for sending in stories. Keep sending in stories. You can send it to momsandmysteries@gmail.com. Just put mailbag, and we'll have a new one in April. And I cannot wait to take that on.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to get into the story of Stephanie Wasilishin this week. And this is a story where Haley actually had the opportunity to work with a family member of Stephanie's. She was able to work with her daughter, Nikki, and we'll talk about Nikki quite a lot in this episode as we get into it. Stephanie Marie Wasilishin, who often went by Stacy, was a woman whose life had been shaped by both joy and tragedy. Born on June 1st, 1961, in Chicago, Stephanie was one of 7 children in a large and lively family. She had a twin brother named Stephen, and although they entered the world together at just 3 pounds, 1 ounce each, their stories were heartbreakingly different. When Stephen was 7 months old, he contracted measles, and at that time, there was no vaccine for measles, and so his condition quickly worsened. Their parents, Harry and Bernice, called the Berwyn police for an ambulance because Stephen had a high fever and was very sick. But help was actually really slow to arrive. And when 2 officers did arrive, they refused to go into their house or take them to the hospital in their patrol car. The police allegedly suggested calling a cab and just not mentioning that the baby had measles. I imagine at this time when there is no vaccine for measles, that's one of those things like you don't want to go out announcing that somebody is infected with measles. But this is so sad that it was like this, that they weren't able to get care for their baby because people were scared of getting measles.
Yeah, but also scary that the cops would say, please call a cab, an unsuspecting cab, and just
what did
go
the cab do? I know, that's horrible. So the family allegedly asked for the police to actually escort them in their own car, just give them a police escort, but they wouldn't even do that. And baby Stephen, Stephanie's twin, ultimately passed away later that night. The loss of her twin was something that Stephanie carried with her for the rest of her life. But despite this early loss, she grew up with a reputation for being really full of life herself. Stephanie's sister Wendy said that she was just funny and she liked to joke around a lot. After her twin brother's death, the family relocated to Arizona in hopes of having a fresh start, but tragedy struck again in 1975 when Stephanie's father passed away at just 45 years old. Stephanie was still in high school at the time, but she worked hard through her grief and graduated in 1979. Not long after finishing high school, Stephanie got married to a man named Craig, and they had a daughter together named Nikki. Their relationship unfortunately didn't work out, but they remained in contact and they co-parented their daughter. Stephanie eventually found her passion in the culinary world, and she became a pastry chef at a restaurant in Sedona. And that is where she met Russell Peterson sometime around 1987, and they began dating. Things progressed, and this couple moved in on Coffee Pot Drive together, and they soon welcomed a daughter of their own, who they named Christina. In the summer of 1993, Russell had plans to go to New York to attend a cooking class at Cornell. He was supposed to leave on July 10th, but this was a trip that he would ultimately never take.
It was just after 1:40 a.m. on July 9th when a 911 dispatcher answered a call that would set off a chain of events that no one could have predicted. Russell struggled to find the right words, but he said he needed help and that there had been a very bad accident during an argument with his wife. The operator, of course, asked for more details, and Russell said, "She's been shot." The dispatcher asked who shot her, and Russell responded, "I don't know who. I might have. She might have shot herself." Emergency responders rushed to the scene as Russell followed instructions on performing CPR. Minutes later, Sedona police arrived and entered the home through the front door, which was unlocked. They announced their presence and called out for anyone inside to come out. Russell emerged from the hallway just outside the primary bedroom with a cordless phone pressed up to his ear. His right hand was covered in blood. Russell led the officers to the bedroom where Stephanie was lying on the floor near the closet. She was wearing her night clothes and the fabric was torn at the upper front button area. There was a large gunshot wound on the left side of Stephanie's throat, and she had blood pooling near the right side of her head. When the police arrived, Stephanie had no pulse. As first responders worked to get control of the situation, they realized that 4-year-old Christina was sitting on the bed in the room. She was saying, "That's my mommy." An officer quickly carried her out of the room while another officer found Nikki, Stephanie's older daughter, still asleep on the other side of the house. Nikki was woken up, and soon she and her little sister, along with Russell, were transported to the police station. At the station, officers told Russell that Stephanie had been pronounced dead. They asked him to explain exactly what happened that night. Russell said that he had worked late the night before and that he didn't arrive home until after 12:30 a.m. When he got home, he found that Stephanie had been drinking and she was on a long phone call with her ex-husband, Nikki's father, a man named Craig. Things were already tense because Stephanie was upset about how Russell had been accepted into this prestigious cooking school at Cornell and that he'd already purchased his plane ticket there, but Stephanie really didn't want him to go, and this was later confirmed by multiple people. So as their argument escalated, Stephanie allegedly stormed into the bedroom and retrieved a gun. It was a .44 Magnum that belonged to Russell. It was given to him as a gift from his father, and it was tucked away in a holster on the top shelf of their closet, hidden under various other items. According to Russell, she returned to the living room with the gun in her hands, pointed at him, and said she was going to blow his head off before firing a single shot that missed Russell. A struggle then ensued, and Russell said they met in the hallway between the living room and the bedroom, where a second shot rang out, this time hitting Stephanie in the neck and ending her life.
At around 4:40 a.m., investigators arrived at the station and learned that 4-year-old Christina was actually awake and talking. She told the officers that she had been asleep when she heard a single gunshot, and she jolted awake and saw her father standing over her mom with a gun. Christina said that she didn't see the actual shooting, but when she stepped into her parents' bedroom, she saw her mom lying face down on the floor and she was bleeding. Her father, Russell, was sitting on the bed crying. The little girl said that her dad told her he fired the gun and that it was hopeless. Nikki told the police that she was asleep during the shooting as well and that she hadn't seen or heard anything at all until she was woken up and escorted out of her home. As they sat in the back of the patrol car, Christina kept repeating, "Poppy killed Mommy." And Nikki tried to reason with her sister, but the tragic news was confirmed when Russell himself told Nikki that Stephanie was dead. On the way to the police station, Russell said to Nikki, "I'm sorry, I love you, and I want to keep the family together." At the station, officers arranged for the girls to be placed in temporary foster care in Cottonwood, Arizona, so that they would be able to get some sleep while the police talked to Russell. At 5:40 a.m., they sat down with him to hear his full version of the events. Russell said that July 8th had started like any other day, with him and Stephanie waking up at around 11:30, having their morning coffee, and then going into work. Stephanie left work around 5:30 p.m., while Russell stayed later that night and didn't get home until after midnight. When he first got home, everything was fine and seemed normal. He said that he kissed Stephanie and then he went to take a shower. It wasn't until after he got out of the shower that things really took a turn. Russell explained that Stephanie told him she spoke with her ex Craig on the phone for 2 hours that day. And at some point, Russell brought up his upcoming trip to New York, and Stephanie got upset. But Russell wasn't too concerned about it because they had had arguments just like this in the past. But then, Russell said that Stephanie got up and went to the bedroom and came back with a gun. She allegedly stated that she was going to shoot him as he sat on the couch, and then she raised the gun and fired a shot, but the bullet missed him. Russell said he jumped up from the couch and followed Stephanie down the hall, trying to talk to her and just calm her down. But when they got into the bedroom, she cocked the gun again and told Russell that she was going to kill him. And we have so much more to get into after a quick break to hear a word from this week's sponsors.
Who doesn't appreciate the finer things in life? I love a little bit of luxury, but sometimes the price tag is a bit much, and that's why I turn to Quince. They've quickly become my go-to for high-quality essentials at prices that actually make sense.
Quince has everything from 100% Mongolian cashmere sweaters starting at just $50 to washable silk tops, organic cotton sweaters, and 14-karat gold jewelry. The best part? They're priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. By partnering directly with top factories, Quince cuts out the middleman and passes those savings directly onto us.
What really sold me on Quince is their commitment to ethical manufacturing practices and premium fabrics. It feels good knowing that items are responsibly made and the quality definitely holds up. I personally picked up some linen shorts from Quince. I'm actually wearing them today, and they've been perfect for these warmer days. They look just as nice as the higher-end brands, but without the hefty price. So if you're looking for luxury that doesn't come with the luxury price tag, Quince is the way to go. Trust me, you won't regret it.
Give yourself the luxury you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/moms for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/moms to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/moms.
Have you ever been to a dentist who wants to chat with you while they're cleaning your teeth? Mandy, you and I have talked about this. You've run into this very thing at your dentist's office.
The worst.
You know exactly how awkward it is. But that's not how healthcare should be. You should enjoy these appointments, even when they're the dentist's office.
ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality, in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment. You can filter for doctors who take your insurance, are located nearby, are a good fit for any medical needs you might have, and are highly rated by verified patients.
And once you find the right doctor, you can see their actual appointment openings, and then choose a time slot that works for you and click to instantly book a visit. And appointments made through ZocDoc happen fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking. You can even score same-day appointments.
Don't settle for less when it comes to your health. Find a doctor who meets your needs on your schedule and book your next appointment on ZocDoc today. If I needed a doctor, ZocDoc is where I would go. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/mysteries to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/mysteries. ZocDoc.com/mysteries.
And now back to the episode. So before the break, we were talking about the heartbreaking events that led to Stephanie Wasilishin's death. Russell said he lunged for Stephanie's wrist in an effort to pry the gun away from her, and they struggled for 10 to 15 seconds before the gun went off again, and Stephanie collapsed face down. Russell said he stood there in shock. He was unsure of what to do and unable to believe what had just happened. He bent down and rolled Stephanie's head towards him slightly to look at her, and then he put the gun back in the holster and set it on the shelf. But then, several moments later, he thought maybe he shouldn't have moved the gun, so he took it out of the holster and laid it back on the floor. He said, quote, "I didn't want to be accused of murder, but it happened. There's nothing you can do about it at this point," end quote. Russell said that he noticed his young daughter, Christina, was standing down the hallway as he went into the en-suite bathroom. When he came out of the bathroom and saw that Stephanie was still on the ground, he called 911 and asked for help. Investigators asked Russell to describe his relationship with Stephanie, and he said that they loved each other, but their relationship had the typical ups and downs. After the interview, Russell signed a consent form for the police to search his house, and he went back there with them. He was asked to change clothes and to give the clothes he was wearing when the shooting occurred to the police. He was later taken back to the station while officers started to process the scene. Russell asked the officers if a guy named Peter could come pick him up, and they said yes. At this point, they don't have any reason to hold him in custody, so Russell stayed with Peter until a friend got him a hotel room. Peter actually owned the restaurant that both Russell and Stephanie worked at. He later told police that Stephanie had been distraught recently and that on the day before her death, several employees noticed that she was upset about something, and they believed that Russell's upcoming 10-day-long trip to New York had something to do with it. Peter also told police that while he didn't want to speak poorly about Stephanie, it was his observation that the relationship between her and Russell was always argumentative and that Stephanie was always the one who caused the problem. That was a direct quote. Peter said that he felt like it made more sense for Stephanie to have taken her own life than it did for Russell to have murdered her. Peter had never heard Russell speak a mean word or complain about his wife, but Stephanie had said some harsh things about the time Russell spent at work.
Peter further alluded to what he thought were threats that Stephanie had made, not necessarily life-threatening comments, but she was very annoyed and distraught because Russell had been so wrapped up in work. She taunted him often when they worked together, and she spoke openly to coworkers about her miserable life and all the problems that she had at home. Stephanie came across as being jealous of Russell's success, and she was constantly antagonizing him. Another employee named Catherine told police that she worked with Stephanie on July 8th and that they had talked in the parking lot before Stephanie left work around 5:30. Catherine said that Stephanie was upset and told her that she just wasn't having a good day, and she actually asked Catherine if she would speak to Russell about his upcoming trip. According to Catherine, Stephanie had confided in her about her rough childhood and how she'd been abused by her mother and stepfather, as well as her first husband, Craig. But Catherine also noticed that Stephanie would push Russell's buttons on purpose. He always did his best to ignore her and to not respond, and Catherine said she never saw any physical violence between the couple. Another fellow employee named Susie said that she and her boyfriend had actually given Russell a ride home from work that day, and he was in good spirits and was really excited for his trip to New York. Susie had also spoken with Stephanie multiple times that day, and she was not in good spirits at all. She was actually upset because Russell was working so much, and she felt like he wasn't leaving enough time for her and the kids, and she was really stressed about money and about this long trip that Russell was about to go on. Susie said that she had actually seen Stephanie get upset with her kids before in the past, but she had never heard her threaten Russell, and likewise, she'd never seen Russell get upset with Stephanie or threaten her either. Susie said that Stephanie was just someone who had a very strong personality, and she was very blunt and would just cut straight to the point, sometimes in a way that could come across as offensive to others. Another coworker named Lewis said that Russell was a good person, and Stephanie was the one constantly putting people down and trying to dig at Russell. Lewis once asked Stephanie himself why she was always so mean to her husband, and she said, "It hurts to be nice."
Investigators combed through the couple's house in search of anything that could shed some light on what actually happened the night Stephanie was shot. They found multiple wood splinters scattered across the walkway outside, and inside there was a bullet hole piercing the wall between the front window and the door. The jacket of the bullet was still embedded deep within the door. A curtain had a hole in it from where the bullet had torn through the fabric. On the table next to the couch, there was a partially full glass of beer, and on the coffee table, there was an empty glass of red wine and a single beer bottle. In the bedroom, they found a .44 Magnum revolver laying on the floor on top of a brown leather holster near Stephanie's right shoulder. 4 bullets were found to be still inside the cylinder of the revolver. Blood was found on the corner of a table near Stephanie's head, as well as splattered on the TV stand and streaked across the ceiling and wall next to her. There was a bullet embedded above the table with strands of hair attached to it. The handgun and the holster were examined for prints, but the results weren't suitable for finding a match. Under Stephanie's right arm was a gold-colored neck chain, and her left arm was bent partially under her body. A smaller piece of a similar gold chain was found near the doorway to the bedroom. Stephanie's hair had a pair of glasses entangled in it, along with 3 yellow chains and a locket attached to it. Stephanie's hands were bagged so they could be tested for gunshot residue, and her body was taken to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy. The autopsy was completed on July 9th and showed that the muzzle of the gun was pressed against her skin when it was fired. She died instantly because the bullet severed her windpipe and spinal cord before passing through the left part of her neck and exiting on the right rear part of her neck around her hairline. There was a bruise under her chin and a small fracture inside the right portion of her skull and under her brain. Gunpowder residue was found on Stephanie's left hand, but even though she was right-handed, there was none actually found on her right hand. A toxicology test showed that Stephanie had a blood alcohol content of 0.17, which is just over twice the legal driving limit. Due to these findings, the medical examiner decided to wait for further investigation before making a determination on Stephanie's cause of death.
Neighbors told the police that Stephanie and Russell had always been pretty quiet, but for about the last year and a half, they heard the couple fighting at night a lot more, though nobody said they ever saw anything violent taking place. There were also no reports of domestic violence in the police records. Russell's parents, Ken and Phyllis, stood behind their son and said that he was a very passive person who had been pursuing his life goal to become a chef, and he was very talented and looking forward to attending the program at Cornell. On the other hand, they described Stephanie as being someone who had come from a rough life and who both spoke and acted very tough. They described Stephanie as being a very tormented young lady who had come from an abusive background, as her mother had always resented her since the death of her twin brother. The Petersons were adamant that Russell was not an aggressive man and that it was hard for them to believe that he would purposely have hurt his wife. Police spoke with Stephanie's mom, Bernice, who said that Stephanie and Russell's relationship was, quote, not smooth, and that Russell was both physically and emotionally abusive towards her. She said there had been at least 50 different occasions that Stephanie had told her about Russell's abuse, and that after Stephanie's death, Russell called her and told her that Stephanie had shot herself, but he didn't mention that they had been wrestling over the gun. Stephanie's sister, Wendy, who was Stephanie's best friend, had talked to her around 7:15 on the night of her death, and she told investigators that Stephanie wasn't in a good mood that evening. She explained that she had been having these problems with Russell and they hadn't slept together in 7 months, but she told her sister that she had actually arranged for the kids to be gone and she had plans to spend some alone time with Russell that night. Stephanie and her sister talked for about 45 minutes, and then Stephanie called Wendy back again around 10:30 p.m., and they talked for another 35 minutes. During that second call, Stephanie was much happier. According to Wendy, Stephanie loved her life and she was afraid of death, and so Wendy didn't believe that Stephanie would have ever taken her own life. Stephanie's mom and sister both told investigators that Russell was abusive towards her and that he would often drink too much.
Stephanie's brother Lance echoed what her other family members said and confirmed that his sister was not suicidal and said that she actually tried to make things work with Russell, but they were having issues. The couple wasn't having sex anymore, and Russell was allegedly physically abusive, which Lance had seen himself in the past. He said that he was at their apartment when Russell started screaming and shoving Stephanie. Lance stepped in and nothing else happened. Stephanie's daughter, Nikki, who was 10 at the time, told police that her mom may have had a couple beers on the night of her death. Nikki recalled that her mom kept yelling for Nikki to go to her room because she was trying to talk on the phone. She was talking to Nikki's father, Craig, and making arrangements for Nikki to visit him. Nikki told police that her mom and Russell got along great. She said they were the best of friends and they liked each other a lot and they didn't fight very often. She said that she had never seen Russell hit her mom or be mean to her or her little sister. She had never seen her mom hit Russell either. Nikki said that the couple would argue about not spending enough time together as a family, but she also said that Russell was a nice guy. According to Nikki, her mom was upset that Russell was spending money to go to this cooking school. Investigators asked Nikki about Russell's drinking habits, and she said that she didn't think he drank a lot, but when he drank too much at home, he would bump into things. On the night of July 8th, Nikki, her sister Christina, and Stephanie were all watching TV and playing hide and seek, but then Stephanie got mad at the girls and sent them to their rooms. Nikki wrote some letters and then told Stephanie she was going to sleep. She kissed her mom goodnight, and she went to bed around 11 p.m. She said she thought 15 minutes had passed when she heard Russell get home, but then she drifted off to sleep.
Stephanie's ex-husband, Craig, was interviewed, and he explained that he and Stephanie had broken up after 5 years together because they just didn't see eye to eye, but their relationship in the recent days had been a lot more friendly. Stephanie had called Craig on the night of the 8th, and they talked about the problems that Stephanie and Russell were having and about plans for Craig to visit with Nikki. Then they started reminiscing about old times. Craig said that Stephanie had told him about Russell's drinking habits before, and she hinted around that he had roughed her up in the past. Craig was asked if he owned any guns and whether Stephanie had ever shot any of them during their relationship together. He said that he did have a gun, but he didn't think Stephanie had ever shot it. But he ended up changing his mind and saying that she may actually have shot his gun a couple of times, he just couldn't be 100% sure. According to Craig, Stephanie had an average temper, and she would often say extreme things like, "I'm going to kill you," but it was always in a joking manner. He said that Stephanie had never talked to him about suicide. He further said that she was a very strong-willed woman. A friend of the couple named Kay told authorities she felt that Stephanie was a little resentful and jealous of Russell's success, and she was upset because he seemed like he was married to his work more than he was to her. But according to Kay, Russell was a good-hearted person who really never complained about anything. Another longtime friend of Stephanie said that he didn't feel she would have shot anyone or even have handled a gun in any way. Stephanie's oldest sister, Kathleen, also spoke with the police, and she said that her sister was, quote, "a little slow with no career goals other than being a mother." But her sister Kathleen did say that Stephanie was considering leaving Russell, even though she was hesitant to do so because of the daughter they had together. Stephanie had also told Kathleen about Russell's alleged abusive behavior, and Kathleen offered to help Stephanie get out of the relationship, but she said she never personally witnessed any signs of abuse. She just knew that Stephanie was feeling unsure and growing more and more unhappy over the previous 6 months or so.
The police talked with Russell again on the 10th and asked him to explain what happened and to describe what type of person Stephanie was. He said that on July 8th, he had one drink at work before his coworker drove him home. When he arrived, Stephanie had been drinking and he went to take a shower. After his shower, he and Stephanie shared a bottle of wine, and Stephanie told Russell that she had talked to Craig for 2.5 hours earlier that day and that he, meaning Craig, had invited her to go and stay with him to see if they could patch things up. Russell said that Stephanie wasn't threatening to leave and go back to Craig, she was just telling him what happened on this phone call. Russell said that he was uncomfortable with what Stephanie was saying, but it didn't really bother him all that much because Craig was Nikki's father. He really didn't have a problem with Stephanie talking to Craig, but he said he was surprised to hear they were talking for so long that night, as normally they were only talking for about 10 to 15 minutes over money or things that had happened. It wasn't normal for them to talk for 2.5 hours. After having the bottle of wine, Russell said that he may have been slightly impaired, but he doesn't remember any big heated conversation or confrontation before Stephanie just got up and came back with a gun and threatened to shoot him. Russell said he put his hands up and asked Stephanie if she was crazy, and that's when she fired one shot, narrowly missing Russell. Then she recocked the gun and walked back into the bedroom while Russell said he just sat there for a second or two trying to process and absorb everything that was happening. Then he went into the bedroom. Russell claimed the gun was never in his hand and said there may or may not have been a scuffle before the gun actually went off and Stephanie fell to the floor. At that moment, he looked down the hall and saw Christina, and she looked right at him and said, quote, "You killed Mommy. Mommy's dead," end quote. He told her that he didn't kill Mommy and to go back to her room, but then he said he got very nervous. He said, quote, "I mean, people who've never been put in this situation cannot explain the anxiety, what's going through everything," end quote. So he said he mindlessly picked up the gun, put it in the holster, and put it away. But then he put it back.
They also asked Russell what he thought happened that night, and he said that he believes that after Stephanie pointed the gun at him and fired a shot, she had no hesitation in going straight into the bedroom and shooting herself. Russell said he believed that Stephanie had died by suicide. When they confronted him about the arguments over his trip to New York, he said, maybe this was her way of getting back at me, in a sick manner, that this was the one and only way. Russell claimed to have only shot a gun twice in his life and said that it was his understanding that Stephanie had actually been exposed to guns when she was married to Craig and maybe had a little more experience with them, but he didn't know how many times she had actually fired a gun before. Russell described Stephanie as being a loving person who loved and cared for her children and for Russell too. He said that she had stuff in her past that hadn't really been discussed between them, and he wondered if maybe she was too embarrassed to talk about the situation she had been in before with the abuse and everything else. Russell said that he took her out of an abusive environment with her ex, Craig. Russell said that Stephanie had never been physically aggressive or violent, but she would always try to verbally manipulate him or use their daughter, Christina, as a pawn and threaten to take her and keep her away from Russell to get him to do what she wanted. Investigators told Russell that they heard Stephanie would also make threats to do things like stick a knife in his back or poke his eyes out. And Russell really didn't deny that Stephanie had said things like that. He said that she would always say these off-the-wall things when she was mad, but he never actually felt like they were credible threats. He never actually felt like she was a danger to him. He told the police that their sex life was kind of up and down, but they did have their good moments. On July 11th, Russell contacted investigators and asked that they meet with him at the house as soon as possible to go over the events again. During this meeting, Russell said he did not think that he had ever wrestled Stephanie for the gun. Now he was remembering what happened more clearly, and he said that Stephanie had most certainly shot herself. He remembers seeing her fall over, hit her head on the table, and fall to the ground. He said that if he did try to get the gun from Stephanie, he definitely would have tried to point it either up, down, or away from either one of them. Weeks later, on July 30th, Stephanie's sister Wendy called the investigators because Russell actually contacted her, and during their conversation, he told her that the police didn't need to do any official reenactment of the scene or to give him a polygraph or anything like that because they already had enough evidence and information. But he did say that he would have been willing to do anything the police asked. They just didn't need him to. And the officers noted in their report when, they get this phone call inquiring about this, that they did not ever tell Russell any of those things. They never told him that they didn't need to do a reenactment or that he didn't need to do any further things. And we have more to get into after one last break to hear a word from this week's sponsors.
Your hair is more than what you see in the mirror. Stress, hormones, and lifestyle all affect what you see on the outside. Nutrafol's science-backed whole-body approach targets the root cause of hair thinning, which helps you achieve your best hair yet.
Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand trusted by over 1.5 million people. See thicker, stronger, faster-growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol.
I've been using Nutrafol for several months now, and I really have seen a difference. My hair feels thicker, and I've noticed less shedding. Nutrafol works from within to address things like stress and hormones, and I've definitely seen improved hair growth and visible thickness. It's not just physical changes. I really feel so much more confident with how my hair looks, too. My mom has even noticed and asked what I was taking, and I was able to tell her it was Nutrafol.
Everyone's root causes of hair thinning are so different, so a one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't really cut it. Nutrafol offers multiple formulas tailored to different stages like postpartum and menopause, and also for specific lifestyles like plant-based diets.
Building a hair growth routine is simple. Start your hair growth journey with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code MOMS. Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code MOMS. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code MOMS.
It's starting to warm up here, but the mornings are still pretty chilly. And with the cold weather, I'm definitely not spending any more time outside than I have to. But one thing that can make being stuck inside with my cat less than ideal the litter box. If there's anything that can really stink up my space, it's that one thing. That's why I switched to Pretty Litter, and let me tell you, it has made a world of difference. Pretty Litter's non-clumping formula traps odors and moisture. It's ultra-absorbent, lightweight, low dust, and 1 6-pound bag lasts up to a month. So no more dealing with heavy bags or dust clouds filling up the air. Plus, the odor control is a real game changer. It actually keeps my house smelling fresh even when we're all huddled inside for the winter. And what I love most about Pretty Litter is the peace of mind it gives me. It changes color to help detect early signs of potential health issues like urinary tract infections or kidney problems, and it's just a really simple way to stay on top of my cat's health and avoid any surprises. But that's not all. Pretty Litter takes it even a step further by shipping straight to my door. So there's no more lugging around heavy bags of litter from the store or dealing with the hassle of running out in the cold. It's convenient, effective, and honestly, a total lifesaver during the winter months.
Indoor cats and indoor humans agree. Pretty Litter helps my house smell fresh and clean. Go to prettylitter.com/moms to save 20% on your first order and get a free cat toy. That's prettylitter.com/moms to save 20% on your first order and get a free cat toy. prettylitter.com/moms. Terms and conditions apply. See site for details. And now back to the episode. So before the break, we were discussing Russell's account of the tragic night that Stephanie was shot. He claims there was a struggle over the gun, which discharged, leading to her death, but his story became increasingly inconsistent, with his behavior and statements raising suspicions as investigators uncovered more details. Investigators reenacted the scene based on Russell's story on August 3rd. Russell was not involved with the reenactment, but they had a woman named Nancy there who had the same arm and hand measurements as Stephanie's. They used a handgun of the same size and model and tried to simulate Stephanie's firing the weapon without there being any struggle. They weren't able to have Nancy pull the trigger when they attempted to recreate the same angle of entry. Nancy had trouble pulling the trigger in that position, but when an investigator struggled with her over the gun, she was able to discharge it. On August 11th, the medical examiner's office officially ruled Stephanie's death a homicide. In order for Russell's story to be true, Stephanie would have had to hold the gun in her left hand to create the angle and location of the entry and exit wounds. And Stephanie was right-handed, and there was no gun residue on her right hand. There was some on the webbing of her left hand, though. The medical examiner believed that this indicated that Stephanie was in a defensive position when she was shot. But investigators would later say there was no way of knowing whether this residue was from the first shot that Stephanie allegedly fired in the living room or from the shot that killed her. By September 3rd, they were ready to talk to Russell again. They wanted him to go over the events of July 8th, starting with before he got home from work. Russell said that Stephanie had called him 3 times that day, which he thought was strange. Usually she might call once to see when he was coming home, but the other 2 calls were odd, and he believed that something happened during her conversation with Craig. Stephanie called Craig back at 11:20 p.m., which was not long before Russell came home. Russell said he didn't really think there was any reason for Stephanie to have called him back. Russell told the investigators that he thought Stephanie had planned on killing him that night. After he got home from work, Stephanie started telling him that he smelled after being at the restaurant all day, but this was normal for Stephanie, who Russell said was kind of, quote, hardcore, straightforward. But Russell really didn't mind. He was excited to spend some alone time with Stephanie that night, and he'd even bought a bottle of wine for them to celebrate his upcoming trip. After Stephanie complained about the way he smelled, Russell took a shower and the couple sat down on the couch having wine together. Russell said that the next thing he knew, she got up and went to the bedroom and came back with the gun, and that's when she threatened to kill him. He went on to describe what happened in the bedroom, and when they asked why Russell didn't believe he ever put his hands on Stephanie, he said that he knows he didn't touch her because after the fatal shot was fired, he remembered watching Stephanie fall from a distance. The moment he saw Stephanie fall, Russell said he knew he was dead, but he just didn't want to accept it. When he saw all the blood and the gun sitting next to her, he freaked out and instinctively picked up the gun and put it away. But then he thought to himself that maybe that wasn't such a great idea, and so he put it back. At some point, Russell touched Stephanie's head and face to see if she was alive.
When Russell finished retelling the events this time, the investigators confronted him about how many inconsistencies there actually were in his story. They told him that they had tested his theory about Stephanie shooting herself, and it just wasn't possible for it to have happened that way. Someone with Stephanie's build wouldn't be able to pull the trigger in the alleged position. Instead, the medical examiner believed that the evidence showed a defensive position with her left hand, meaning there was reason to believe that she was using her left hand to push the gun away while it was being fired. They were also able to confirm that this was a possibility with a reenactment. They asked Russell to explain why Stephanie was in a defensive posture, but he said that he couldn't explain that. They pressed him further and said it appeared that there was a struggle and Russell should tell them the real truth about what actually happened. But Russell stood firm and insisted that the story he told was the truth, and he pointed out that he had been nothing but cooperative with the police throughout this entire investigation. However, the police reminded him that actually, no, he had not been entirely cooperative. He did participate in the first few interviews, but after that, he apparently had canceled numerous appointments, including one for a polygraph, a reenactment, and several appointments that he canceled for follow-up interviews. In this time, Russell also moved and got a new phone number. Investigators told Russell that they had done everything possible and had really bent over backwards trying to prove that Stephanie had shot herself, but they just had not been able to come to that conclusion. Before the end of the interview, Russell was asked whether he had ever hit Stephanie, and he said, "I never, in 6 years, ever raised a hand." Russell never spoke to the investigators again after this meeting, and the polygraph and official reenactment never took place.
At some point, it was learned that someone made a call from Russell and Stephanie's home at 1:36 a.m. This call was to a place in Glendale, and it only lasted about 1 minute. At 1:40, so that's just 4 minutes later, Russell called 911. On October 20th, 1993, investigators met with the Yavapai County Attorney's Office, and it was suggested that police have a psychologist review Russell's statements and then give their opinion. Once that was done, the DA would look over everything and then consider charges. Unfortunately, though, there are no follow-up details as to what happened with this anywhere in the research. However, a couple months later, in December of that same year, the county attorney's office declined to take the case to a grand jury due to insufficient evidence. They acknowledged that Russell had been inconsistent with his story, but also said that trauma could cause confusion or wishful thinking as well. They later declined to take the case a second time. In 1999, Stephanie's sister Wendy went to the Sedona police with information about potential witnesses that she believed should be interviewed in her sister's case. The first person was a guy named Bradley, who Wendy believed Stephanie was having an affair with. This was corroborated through an interview with Russell back in 1993, but it was believed that Stephanie met this Bradley person when she was in need of having her carpet cleaned, and he worked for some sort of carpet cleaning business. The second potential witness Wendy wanted them to look into was a man named Chuck Cash, and this guy knew Russell and had gone to Vegas with him in March of 1993. Wendy believed that at the time of Stephanie's death, Chuck Cash lived at the Arizona Biltmore Resort. While Wendy was there requesting that they interview these two people, she also asked that the bullet fragments that were embedded in the wall above the couch in the living room be analyzed and tested for blood or tissue. The suspicion was that Stephanie was killed before the shot to the wall in the living room was even made, and if that were proven, it would essentially destroy Russell's entire story. It's unclear, though, whether the police did anything that Wendy requested.
Over 20 years later, in June of 2020, investigators met with Wendy again. She told them that she strongly believed that Russell was responsible for Stephanie's death and asked that they keep looking into it. On July 21st, investigators met with a medical examiner to look over the original autopsy. This new medical examiner who was looking at the case was not able to make a determination regarding the manner of death, specifically whether it was a homicide or a suicide. Sedona Police Sergeant Laura Leone told Fox 10 Phoenix that Russell was referred to as a suspect and sometimes referred to as an investigative lead in the police files. She said that she would like to speak to Russell herself and acknowledge just how difficult it was only having his side of the story. Outside of getting a confession out of him, Sergeant Leone didn't really see any other leads. Wendy told Fox 10 that Stephanie loved her kids and that she was a perfect mom who spent a lot of time with her girls. She also said that at the time of her death, Stephanie was planning on leaving Russell for good because of his abusive ways. Wendy said that their mom had even offered for Stephanie to live with her. Nikki, who's Stephanie's daughter and at this point is now an adult, told Fox 10 that she knows her mom would have never touched a gun while she and her little sister were in the house, and that the idea that her mom completed suicide is a complete lie. In July of 2022, Sergeant Michael Dominguez, who was also investigating the case, told the media that after looking at over 400 plus pages of police files, he can't say with certainty whether Stephanie's death was the result of a suicide or a homicide. He said he did feel like the full story wasn't all there in the files and that something had been left out. He said, if you're solely focused that this was a right-handed individual and they could only have used their right hand, which to me is not practical, then having that trajectory to Stephanie's neck would have been difficult. Is it impossible? No. However, if you take that pistol and put it in the person's left hand and you move the gun up, it's exactly at that location of the entry wound. And then he added, the family has over-focused on the fact that she was right-handed and that she could have only done this with her right hand. He added that the theory that Stephanie could have only used her right hand should be taken with a grain of salt because many people are right-hand dominant and still use their left hand for certain other things. Additionally, the contact wound suggested that the gunshot was self-inflicted because in homicide shootings, you typically don't see that the gun is pressed directly up against the victim. Dominguez talked about the variations in Russell's story and said that in his opinion, some variation is actually expected as people remember more things about a traumatic event. It's the ones who repeat the exact same story with the exact same details for years on end that are probably lying. In the end, he said that at this time, from a legal sense, they cannot prove that any crime had actually occurred.
In February of 2023, Nikki posted an update to the Change.org petition she created that was designed to get the police to reinvestigate her mother's death. In the update, Nikki shares that she emailed every member of the Sedona City Council about her mother's case. She ended up having an interview between herself, her aunt, Sedona's vice mayor, and an investigator. As a result of this interview, Nikki's father, Craig, who was the last person, other than Russell, to speak to Stephanie that night, was interviewed. Nikki's been successful in sharing her mom's story with the world, as dozens of podcasts have covered Stephanie's case. As of today, no one has been charged in Stephanie's case. If you have information, please contact the Sedona Police Department at 928-282-3100. This is so sad. I can't imagine being a kid and your mom dying in this way and then just never having all the answers, never having...
Not feeling like you have closure in any way.
Right. Because there are people that believe two different things. So it's not like there's, a trial and somebody's been convicted and all of this stuff. It very much is like there's just not enough information. Sorry,
Right.
We can't really do anything. I did find it very interesting, the idea about the bullet in the wall and how if that had tissue, obviously that's
That
what
makes
would have
sense, yeah.
happened. Makes total sense. So I wish we had more information on what actually happened there. But it does seem like in this story, like, not everything is either documented or, I don't know, or looked into. I don't
Right.
know. And I'm sure there's reasons for everything that's done, but I know that would be really, really hard. So
Really
it's great that
frustrating, yeah.
Stephanie has an advocate in her daughter, Nikki.
Yeah. And Nikki has a TikTok that she shares a lot of different things from her perspective and just shares a lot more information about her mom and kind of the journey that she's been on. So if you're interested in that, we'll have, of course, all of that linked in the show notes. So that is the episode for this week. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We will be back next week. Same time, same place, new story.
Have a great week.
Bye.